One of the most powerful ways to learn a language is through your environment, making sure you are exposed to and engaging with it as much as possible. But without the right approach or doing too much too soon, it can feel extremely overwhelming, especially for beginners. Maybe you're wondering when you can start watching anime properly without English subtitles or read books without translations. It's all about creating the learning environment you need while meeting the current level you're at. In this video, I'll be talking about how to approach immersion so that you can learn while deeply engaging with the language every day. So let's get started. So what actually is immersion? Let's talk about this a bit more. Immersion is actually more than just watching anime casually or setting your phone to Japanese. It's intentionally exposing yourself to natural use of the language and putting effort into comprehension. You might think that you can only achieve that level of exposure by living in Japan, where everyone around you is speaking Japanese and everything is in Japanese all day, every day, but you can actually create an immersive environment from exactly where you are. All it requires is making your environment as Japanese as possible. Setting your phone to Japanese, making memos in Japanese, using post-it notes and writing on them in Japanese are just a couple of ways you can make your environment more Japanese. And even if you don't understand everything, that's totally okay. Immersion doesn't require you to understand everything in order to be successful. In fact, it's actually helping you get comfortable with not understanding everything. This will inevitably happen when you're learning a language, and it's training your brain to adapt and figure out meaning on its own, instead of shutting down and panicking whenever you don't understand something. Immersion works because our brains learn from patterns and repetition subconsciously. Think about when you were a baby and learned your first language. You likely didn't just hear something once and then figured out its meaning and remembered it forever. It likely would have taken you many times of hearing or seeing something over and over again to build that recognition. Your second, third, or even 10th language is no different. Immersion helps you build listening speed, understand natural phrasing, and build intuition for grammar instead of translating by constantly reinforcing these patterns. This is why balancing studying and immersion together is so important. If you were studying alone with no immersion, it would feel rigid and unnatural, and grammar would have a harder time sticking. You don't get to see grammar and vocabulary being used in natural settings, and therefore you're not building the patterns and recognizing cues of when you can use it. On the other hand, immersion alone can feel slow and confusing if you don't have any prior understanding of what's being said, and end up spending most of the time searching up the words and grammar instead of actually consuming the content. The sweet spot is having a good balance of studying and immersion. Studying gives you the background knowledge in vocabulary and grammar, and immersion allows you to reinforce that knowledge through repetition and context. I've noticed that many times as I learn a new vocabulary and grammar, I feel like I notice it straight away when I go to watch or read something. Then it sticks because I've learned to associate the specifics of that scene with the new structure. And then it becomes like an example or a point of reference in my head, and I'm like, oh, so this word can be used to mean this thing, or this grammar can be used in these scenarios. You can learn a grammar point or a vocabulary, hear it repeatedly in real life context, and that's how it sticks. There are different ways you can immerse effectively depending on your level. For beginners, you can stick with simpler materials that have a slower pacing, more furigana or less kanji, and simpler vocabulary. So picture books, beginner podcasts, and children's shows with Japanese subtitles are a great place to start. If you're intermediate level, slice of life drama or anime, YouTube videos targeted at learners, as well as podcasts are a great place to start. Once you reached an advanced level, native content is mostly comprehensible enough for you to immerse in. You can watch news, interviews, variety shows, read books and newspaper, and follow along real-life conversations at a natural speed. Immersing takes more than just consuming content. You have to engage with it. Pause and replay, look up keywords, and pay attention to patterns. As I said before, you don't have to understand 100% of everything. Comprehensible input could be anywhere from about 60 to 80% understanding. That way, you're understanding most of the content, but also introducing yourself to new content and then allowing yourself to grow and expand into new knowledge. Passive immersion can also be a powerful way to immerse yourself when you don't have much time. You could listen to Japanese in the background while commuting or cooking, and that's a good way to get yourself used to multitasking processing Japanese. And also, don't be afraid to rewatch the same content because this can be a powerful way to test your improvement. Now, you might be tempted to try and understand every word, but don't get too hung up on this. It'll have you preoccupied with analyzing and scrutinizing every single word instead of allowing your brain to just breathe and naturally process Japanese. And it adds a lot of unnecessary stress to what is otherwise meant to be a relaxing, leisurely activity. There might be times where you even feel like quitting because it's just too confusing and you feel lost or stuck. But this is totally normal and it's all part of the process. When I first shifted into primarily immersion-based learning from textbook study, it took me a little while to get used to. At first, you might feel like you're not really making any progress and you wonder whether it's actually working. After all, when you have the structure and safety of a laid out path from a textbook, transitioning into immersion can feel like you're entering this vast wasteland of knowledge without any clear direction or path to move into. My advice is you just have to keep going. Progress in immersion is invisible until it suddenly isn't. Once you've been doing it for a while and you one day look back and you suddenly realize, wait, I can actually do this now. Breakthroughs don't happen overnight and they often come after long periods of confusion. I think it's so important to not get hung up when you don't understand something and instead just allow yourself to be confused for a bit. You might be confused the first time, but by the second time it becomes slightly less confusing, and then by the fourth time even less, and then by the 10th time that's when it finally clicks. You just have to stay consistent. With that being said, also make sure you're not only consuming content that you fully understand, otherwise you're not giving yourself any room for growth. Immersion is invaluable if you want to get fluent. It's the tool that takes you from studying Japanese to getting used to Japanese. It doesn't need to be perfect because exposure is first and foremost. Make sure you're getting the input you need at your current level. You can start small as a beginner with simple picture books or basic conversations and then gradually building your way up to more difficult immersion. Consistency matters so much more than quantity, and even 20 minutes of intentional, focused immersion beats hours of absent-mindedly watching anime. And no hate on anime, by the way. Trust the process, even if you don't see results instantly, because it'll come before you know it. That's all I have for this video. I hope you found this information helpful. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye!